I model early steam in the US. There are not many off-the-shelf HO models of early US steam, so I was excited to purchase this Bachmann 420 LaFayette set. I believe it was manufactured before DCC and is no longer in production. To get it to run on my DCC layout, I added a sound decoder, but when I ran it for the first time, it ran very roughly. On every revolution of the drive wheels, it would slow down or even stop. I checked online and read that others were having trouble with the drive gear braking, causing it to slip and not push the drive shaft at all. Bachmann no longer offers replacement gears, but I found that someone had designed a 3D print of the gear. I printed it and proceeded to replace mine. I saw that mine was cracked, but it was not slipping, so that wasn't my problem. Further investigation revealed two other problems, both of which contributed to the stall at every revolution. First, let me show you how I get access to everything. I'm going to remove 7 screws. The first two, at the back of the engine, have unusual heads. My smallest Phillips didn't work because their heads are a combination of Phillips and flat. I had to use a flathead screwdriver. This underside will look different from yours because I've added wires to send power from the track to the decoder in the tender. These two screws in the middle of the engine hold the brass contacts for getting power from the track. As you remove them, take care of how they are positioned so you can put them back correctly. In order to get at the last two screws, you have to remove the leading truck. Be careful, there's a washer that you don't want to lose. These are very small screws. Finally, get these two plastic pieces out of the holes, and then you can remove the underframe to get at the gears. Mine doesn't come out as easily because I have the wires glued down. I'll try to get them out of the way the best I can. What I want is to get access to these two bushings for the driver. First, I have to remove the drive shaft hex bolts. You'll notice that these are fairly long bolts. The first problem I found was that when they tapped the threads for those bolts, they went too far. Here I'm gently prying out the gear and drivers. First, I pull the drivers from the drive gear. I'll try to show you where the threads are cut too far. This is the hole for the drive shaft hex bolt. The threads were tapped into the shaft that the bushing rides on, and the tapping left ridges that were catching on the bushing. I'll show you on the other wheel. And here you see those threads. The bolt does not protrude that far, so the threads really didn't need to go that far. I need to file the threads down so that the bushing rides smoothly. Very gently. When I first took this apart, there was actually a ridge of metal around the bolt hole that was sticking out and rubbing against the bushing. I've already removed it. Both of these tapping remains had to be removed for the bushing to spin smoothly. After filing, I'm lubricating it with Labelle 106. Just a dab. Then I put the bushing over it and spin it around a little. And then the other driver, and spin it around to spread the lubricant. Then I put it back onto the central gear. And the same thing with the other driver. And they don't slip, so the gear should be okay. And now put it all back together. The gear shaft, and then all the screws. First, put the screws on that hold the track power pickup contacts. They need to fit over the groove next to the bushing. This part of the contact has to be in far enough to fit into the groove on the bushing. Double check that the contacts are in place. Now we can attach the front screws and the leading truck. Remember the washer first. And then the two final screws. And then put the two plastic pieces back in their holes. Before putting the locomotive back on the track, I put a little bit of grease on the gear. However, after all that work, it was still sticking, although not quite as badly. So that brings me to the second problem I found. The drive shaft was getting stuck along the guide rail. The shaft rides on both the top and bottom of the rail. The drive shaft, which is supposed to move the full length of the rail, was getting stuck down on the far end. As it got closer to this end, it definitely was sticking. And this was the case on both sides of the engine. I think it was a manufacturing defect. You notice the shaft runs along this rail. It has a bar on the top and a bar on the bottom, and it was actually pinching against the shaft. I couldn't figure out a way to reduce the insides of the bars, especially since it's also the case on the inside where you can't get at it. There's no way to get in there. The assembly was glued in or melted in. I couldn't take it apart. So what I did was reduce the size of the rail. I did so by very carefully shaving off this portion of the shaft. On the bottom and on the top, and as best I could on the inside. I did that both on the outside rail and on the inside rail, like this, very carefully. You don't want to remove too much. Shave it off very, very carefully until it slides smoothly. That was the case on both sides of the engine. So I finally connected the drive shafts to the drivers with the hex bolts. And that's it. And here's the final result. Everything works well. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the hobby.